very excited. My friends are going to be so jealous. On the phone with me is Kevin Conroy. He's been Batman for the last 20 years in just about every animated incarnation of the Batman. Kevin Conroy, how are you?
Good to be here, Dan.
Yeah, let's do that for a second. Can I just...
Get in the Batcave. Get in the Batcave now.
Can I just talk to Batman for just a second? I have a few questions that have been just lingering. I just got to know, like, what is your favorite... Which do you prefer, the Batmobile, the Bat boat, the Bat plane?
Oh, the Batmobile.
Why is that?
Awesome car. Are you kidding? It's an incredible car.
And
what can't it do?
That's right. What's your favorite weapon, Batman?
The Batarang.
It's iconic. It's very cool.
It's so simple, and it's very iconic.
And how are the ladies?
It takes a lot of skill.
Bruce Wayne is a ladies' man. Does Batman get a lot of women, hitting on him?
He's a loner. He's a very isolated guy.
This is true.
And I think a lot of women hit on him, but he's a guy who crawls back to his cave at the end of the day, basically.
Literally. Kevin, how did you get into voice acting, and did you ever think that, when you first did Batman, did you think you'd still be doing Batman 20 years later?
Okay, I'm going to switch back to my own voice now. No, I completely stumbled into it. I live in New York. I was in L.A. working on another show, and I did voiceovers, commercial voiceovers on the side. Most stage actors in New York do to supplement the theater work. And my voiceover agent suggested I just go to Warner Brothers. They were putting a new show together, and see what would happen. I'd never done any animation voices before. I'd never done anything in animation before. And
you've done a ton of stage work, so live audiences. You've done quite a bit of live action television as well.
Yeah, that's what I was in L.A. at that point for. I was doing, I don't remember what show I was doing. It would have been 91, but I was there for some reason. And so I just gave it a shot. I'd never done anything before for animation. And it was just, one of those lucky, unusual situations where it was the right actor for the right character who had the right voice. It was just a unique set of circumstances, and a lot of it had to do with luck.
And there's actually a slight difference in the voices, right?
Sorry?
There's actually a slight difference in the voices that you provide for Bruce Wayne and Batman, even though they're the same person.
Well, initially, actually, there's an interesting story behind that. Initially, there was a big difference because, actors always like to make things complicated. And,
okay.
Why do something simple when you can make it complicated, right?
Yeah.
And like to play around with things. And so initially, I did a big distinction between the Batman and the Bruce Wayne voice, since Batman was so husky and dark and mysterious. I thought it'd be fun if Bruce Wayne was very in another direction, much more of a playboy, much more of a bon vivant, like almost a David Niven kind of quality to him.
Okay.
A lot of sarcasm, a lot of irony. I've really played with a lot of humor and a lot of color to the voice, and using a lot of the higher register, and they loved that, and it was great. But then as the show started being actually painted by the artists, they realized they were going to go with a completely black background, which was the first time that was done. Instead of painting on a white background, they were painting on a black background. So the whole show was going to have a really dark film noir look to it.
Right.
And that toned the whole show in a darker tone. So they had me go back and revoice the first few shows and make Bruce Wayne's voice much closer to the Batman voice, to tone it down. So there was a very subtle distinction. And it worked for the look of the show better.
Definitely. My thoughts are split in half here. You actually also, in at least one episode, what am I looking at here? You did a voice. At one point, you had to do Bruce Wayne's father, Batman.
Well, my favorite, that was my favorite episode, actually. It's called Perchance to Dream. And it was all in black and white, or mostly in black and white. And it was an episode where Bruce Wayne gets drugged, and he's under the influence of this drug, he goes back to his childhood, and he relives a lot of the drama of his youth. So I did Bruce Wayne and Batman, those two voices at the beginning of the show, and then once Bruce Wayne is drugged, I had to do the drugged Batman sound, and then when he goes back to his childhood, I had to do an adolescent sound, and then in those dreams, he was the adolescent having conversations with his father, Bruce Wayne Jr.
I'm following you completely.
So there were 5 voices
yeah.
in this episode, and they all had to be distinct, but they all had to be believably related. You know, they had to be, you know what I mean? They had to be distinct from each other, but believable that they were all related. And I did it in real time. So the conversations were going on in and out of voice with myself.
Right, rather than sticking to one voice and then editing it and piecing it together.
All the other,
yeah.
Just to get the dramatic feel of the scenes. And it was a blast. I had so much fun. I had so much fun doing it.
Can you give me an example of each voice?
No, I'm not a good writer. I'm a terrible writer. But
that's a fair point.
But it was fun. I know. I'm sorry. I'm bad at that stuff.
That's all right. What was there a revelation for you coming from the stage and from live action? Was there anything about voice acting that surprised you?
You know, it's interesting. Because of the way the industry has evolved, there used to be a certain group of actors who did all the animation voices. And there was a whole team of people who did a lot of that. Well, in the last 10 years, you probably noticed that it's a lot of film stars now and television stars and names who do voices. So there's been a real transition in the industry away from what are traditional cartoony, quote-unquote, voices to dramatic voices. So they bring a lot of actors into the recordings now. And this all happened just as I was working on Batman, because I started doing it in 91. So that's 25 years ago. That was a transition that happened in the industry while I was doing this. So I've seen this happen where they bring in more and more name stars now who have no background in animation or in voice work, but are really good actors. And some of them really get it, and some of them really don't, because it's not about just acting the way you would normally act on camera, but it's also not about being cartoony with your voice. It's a middle ground. You only have your voice to tell the story. You don't have your face to rely on camera the way a lot of actors are used to. But on the other hand, if you do too much with your voice, it becomes that old-fashioned cartoony sound, and it's not real. It's not realistic anymore. And audiences have gotten so sophisticated now that they'll tune that out in a second. They'll hear it as cartoony, and they'll know that you're lying. You know that's not realistic. But then I've also seen actors just come in and do the regular voices they would use on camera, and it's boring. It doesn't work. Right. It just doesn't work. And they'll. I've seen Andrea Romano work with an actor and work with an actor and work with an actor, and at the end of the session, she'll say over the microphone, "Kevin, could you stay with us for a few minutes? We have a few more notes." And she'll let the other actor go, and then she'll say to me, "Okay, you're going to have to stay here for a couple of hours because we're recasting the role and we're bringing in someone else."
Oh, wow.
Because that just didn't work. That was an on-camera person who just was giving an on-camera performance, and on camera it would have been great, but because it's only their voice on the microphone, it just didn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes complete sense. It was really interesting, too. On that note, I mean, I don't want you to name names on that, but you did, are you in the booth by yourself, or are you with, when these actors, well, it sounds like they were in the room with you, right?
Well, that's a wonderful thing about working with Andrea Romano, who is, by the way, the best director in the business. I just happened to land in her lap when I started. I mean, and she has been my guide through this whole process, and she's probably the best you can work with. So that was just an amazing lucky break. But she really likes to get the actors together in a booth.
Nice.
Because you get it's like an old-fashioned radio play. You just get that interaction with people feeding each other. Actors are better the better the other actors who are around them are. You know what I mean? You work as well as you are fed from the other people. You give and take. It's like a ball game. There's a lot of give and take. And so other studios, which shall remain nameless, prefer to have actors alone in the booth because they have a completely clean take, and in post-production it makes their job a lot easier. But they don't get the same kind of performances that you get when you have everybody together. It's just not the same. When Mark Hamill and I are in the booth, we've been doing this for 20 years together.
Mark Hamill's the Joker for people
He's the Joker.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know, he's an incredible voice actor.
Yes.
He becomes the Joker, and the two of us go off on these things together, these riffs we get going. It's so much fun that, they have to edit out a lot of what we do.
I was going to ask because, you always hear, all the funny animated shows. You hear there's just nonstop laughter between takes and everything. I was wondering if that was the same case on a serious show like Batman.
Oh, it happens a lot. Yeah, it happens a lot. Well, think about
That's
it.
Good.
It's so serious.
Yeah.
And if you just do one outrageous thing in the middle of it, like something happened early on when, Batman, there's a lot of physicality, a lot of fighting, a lot of grunts, a lot of groans, a lot of screams, a lot of, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
And early on, I was punched in an early one. And I'm always kidding around with Andrea and Bruce Timm, the creator and producer. And I like to keep the atmosphere in the booth up because I'm the link between all the shows, and most of the other people are guests. So I always like to keep the atmosphere pretty up because you get the best performances out of people if you do that.
Right.
And I'm the one who can get away with doing it because I know I'm coming back the next week.
Right.
So. I know they're not going to replace me.
It's good to be Batman.
If I do something outrageous, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they learned early on that I like to kind of goof around a little bit, and they like that idea because they see what I'm doing. I'm doing it to keep the atmosphere alive and electric in the room, and it works. So early on, I had a fight scene. I was like, Andrea. Like that.
That's awesome.
In the most sensualized way I could.
Did she blush or just burst out?
She howled.
Yeah.
All the producers howled. They had to take a break. So that became a standard operating procedure for years. Every time I would have a major fight scene, they'd say, and then you say... And I go, Andrea.
Have you ever been in awe of any of your co-stars? Like, did you ever meet? You've had Ed Asner on, Michael York's been on. Did any of these people, had you not met them before and you were just kind of starstruck, or?
It's been an unbelievable experience because it took on a life of its own, and the animation business kind of skyrocketed at the same time. So everybody wants to do these things now, and for a while, everybody wanted to be on Batman because it was a very hot show. And then the Justice League, and then Batman Beyond. These shows, each one was really hot, and they had good reputations, so they got really good actors. And I met more people doing this show than I've met on anything else, or in the rest of my career. And it was just right at the end of I think it was. When we did the 100th episode, I think it was, of Batman, the animated series, Warner Brothers took out a 2-page center spread in Variety, which is the entertainment newspaper, and to thank the people who had contributed to the show over the years. And it was hundreds of names, 2 solid pages, column after column after column. And when you looked at it and you saw all those names put together like that, you realized who had been on this show. It's been amazing.
It's my favorite version of Batman. I mean, I love the movies. You throw Batman at me, I'm going to enjoy it, but it seems to be the truest version. The origins of the villains are treated respectably, and
it's the truest to the Dark Knight legend and the Dark Knight series, and I actually, to be honest, was very naive to the story. I only had been exposed to the Batman and Robin, the
Super Friends.
The television series back in the 70s with Burt Ward. That was a real tangent. That wasn't what the show was.
It was a
about.
satire base. It was like kind of a spoof.
Satire on the show, exactly.
Yeah.
And Burt Ward, by the way, played the Gray Ghost on our show as a guest, and he is a wonderful actor to work with, very talented.
Burt Ward or Adam West?
I'm sorry, Adam West, Burt Ward.
That's all right.
I'm sorry, and couldn't have been more gracious about someone else doing the role for a while. He was a very, very talented guy and a nice guy, but yeah, I mean, I came sort of late to understanding the genesis of the story and the history of it, and once I did, I realized that they were really being very true to the original intention, and I think it's why the fans reacted so strongly to it.
It's fantastic, yeah. Now you've got a huge hit on and you've played Batman longer than anybody on screen. I mean, you have more hours logged in as this character than any other actor.
Yeah, I know.
But you've got a huge hit on your hands now with this video game.
Isn't that great?
It's Arkham City this time. Is that correct?
Yeah, a new life. Arkham Asylum was the first one, and now Arkham City. Yeah.
What is the difference in? And I kind of know the answer to this question, but I want to hear you talk about it. What is the difference between voice acting, a television series, and voice acting for video games?
Well, it's dramatic. It's night and day. Voice acting a television series, as I was just describing, is give and take, and it's like a radio play. You're interacting with other actors. There's a dramatic sequence to follow. It's like doing a play in a booth. Games is alone in a booth doing single disjointed lines, 4 takes or 5 takes of each line, 3 versions of each take of each line, and literally thousands of lines. So it's 4-hour blocks in the booth alone. Then you get an hour meal break, and then another 4-hour block alone in the room for day after day after day after day, for either 1 week or 2 weeks, depending on how big your role is and how complicated the game is. But I mean, literally by the end of the week, you sort of forget how to speak English. Your mouth just doesn't form words properly anymore. It's really a weird feeling. Do
you ever get a sore throat? Isn't there there's a lot of screaming and grunting and shouting and stuff,
and
too?
You've got to learn how to pace yourself. But the hardest thing is being alone. Those sound booth proof rooms are very dead spaces intentionally. There's no life in those rooms. So the air tends to be very dead, the sound tends to be very dead, and you're trying to keep yourself up and keep your energy up and play these dramatic scenes with yourself, and then give 3 different versions and then 5 different takes of 3 different versions of each line. In the meantime, you don't necessarily know how the game evolves because it depends on how the player plays.
Right, it's not linear.
So exactly. So you're doing all of this tangentially, in the dark, essentially, and feeding yourself the energy. So you periodically just have to get out of that booth and take breaks to kind of come back in and clear your head and get a perspective on it. It's in a way it's not about acting, but in another way it's just a very complicated kind of acting. It's so different than anything else I'd ever done. And then all of it is then created in post-production. You've just given them the pieces of everything.
Right.
And they put it all together.
Are there any zany... Sorry, go ahead.
And then depending on how the player plays the game, depends on how it evolves.
Right, and for me, it just means that I'm stuck on level 1 for about a month. I'm not the greatest gamer, but I love, I want to be part of that too. So inevitably, I buy the game, but I kind of suck at it. Are there any voices in your head or any parts that you long to play that we haven't heard? I mean, is there are you happy to be the hero all the time, or do you have a Yakko Warner or something in your?
Well, that's a funny thing. When I went in to audition for Batman, the agent sent me in for Batman because, I have a sort of a deep leading man voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I read the script and I thought, I want to play Bullock.
Oh, yeah.
The character. So I went in and, I wanted to do that voice, the sort of broken-nosed cop. And And I asked them, I said, well, can I do this? They said, well, we already have someone cast in that role, but, Batman will be in every episode. And I said, well, yeah, but Bullock is so much fun. And then, so I kept trying to talk my way into other roles. And Andrea is the one who had to say, Kevin,
you're the hero.
They want you for the hero. This is the guy's going to be in every episode. This is the role you want, believe me.
That's great.
So yeah, actors always want to do character work just because it's fun, and it's a stretch. But the people who do those character voices are breathtakingly talented. They're incredible. I mean, there are guys who can do cats who you would swear there's a lion in the room with you.
Yeah.
It's weird.
We have a guy here at work that can actually, he sounds exactly like a baby crying.
Yeah.
It's like a little startling to see it happen, but yeah, that's amazing. You're going to be at Emerald City Comic-Con this weekend. There's a Batman panel at 2:00 on Saturday. You've been to a lot of conventions before, so one last question for you. What is the most memorable fan experience that you've ever had?
Whoa.
It can be good, bad, silly, whatever.
I've been asked to sign some really unusual places.
Okay.
I'll just leave it like that.
There it is. Kevin Conroy, the Batman. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Great. Good talking to you. Take care.